So today we are going to learn lesson 1, the cherry tree. Okay. So do you like to grow tree or plants? Yes, everyone loves. What are your favorite fruits? Which fruit you like? Do you like to grow your favorite fruit tree in your garden? Yes, so we all love to grow the favorite tree in our garden. So cherry trees are some of the most popular landscape trees because of their beautiful spring flowers. Okay, they have beautiful flowers and many varieties produce tasty fruits. So other trees also produce tasty fruits and cherry tree also produces tasty fruit. Okay. So read the story of a boy named Rakesh who lived with his grandfather. So we are going to learn about a Rakesh. So we are going to learn a story of a boy whose name is Rakesh who lived with his grandfather. Okay, so he sowed some cherry seeds because Rakesh was loving cherry fruits. That is the reason he sowed cherry seed in his garden and it became large after few years. So anything which is a living thing to grow, it will take some time. It will take years to grow from small to big. Okay, so in the same manner, the cherry tree also took some years to grow longer, to grow larger. Okay, so we will go ahead with the lesson now. I'll just read it. Okay, one day when Rakesh was 6, that means Rakesh was 6 years old, he walked from Masuri Bazaar eating cherries. So what happened? He went to Masuri Bazaar and he took cherries and he just started walking by eating cherries. There were little sweet. The cherries were little sweet, little sour and small bright red cherries. They have given the taste and color of the cherries, which had come all the way from Kashmir Valley, because cherries have some specific weather wherein which they grow only in that weather condition. It needs a cold weather. That is the reason cherries always will come from Kashmir Valley. And here also in Masuri Bazaar, the Rakesh is eating cherries. It has come from Masuri Valley. Here in Himalayan foothills where Rakesh lived, there were not many fruit trees. Rakesh was living in Himalayan foothills where there were no fruit trees. So the soil was very stony. The soil which has in the Himalayan foothills, the soil which contains, it contains many stones. That is the reason they cannot plant more fruit trees in that. And the cold weather, the dry winds stunt the growth of most of the plants, because the dry cold winds, they will not let the plant grow. Okay, that is the reason they cannot have many fruit trees in Himalayan foothills. But on the more sheltered slopes, there were forests of oak and deodar. So only thing what we can see in Himalayan foothills is sheltered slopes, and there were forest, the big forest of oak trees and deodar trees. The Rakesh lived with his grandfather on the outskirts of Masuri. Masuri is the place and they lived outside the city. Okay, just where the forest began. So they used to stay outside the city and from there this forest used to begin. So grandfather was retired forest manager. So Rakesh used to live with his grandfather and who is a retired manager. He had little cottage outside the town. So they used to stay in that cottage outside the city. Rakesh was on his way home from the school when he brought the cherries. When he was coming back from the school to home, he saw some cherries and he took the cherries and he started walking towards home. And he paid 50 paisa for the bunch. So one cherry cherry bunch completely, it was offered for 50 paisa. It took him about half an hour to walk home, and by the time he reached the cottage, there were only 3 cherries left. He took bunch of cherries, but while walking he started eating one by one and one by one. So just 3 cherries left when he reached home. And have a cherries, grandfather? He is asking. He is offering the cherries to grandfather. And what he is saying? Have a cherries, grandfather? Then grandfather said yes. And so on. He saw the grandfather in the garden. Grandfather took 1 cherry and Rakesh promptly ate other 2 rest cherries. So grandfather said, yes, I will have some cherries. So he took, apart from 3 cherries, grandfather took only 1, and rest of the 2 cherries which are left behind, it was eaten by Rakesh. Now what happens is, rolling it around in his tongue until all the tang had gone. He is rolling the seed inside the mouth until complete tang has gone. And then he placed the seed on the palm on his hand and studied it. That means he is watching carefully what is the seed, how it looks. It is called as studying it. Are cherry seeds lucky? He asked Rakesh. Grandfather is asking because he is just studying. So grandfather is asking Rakesh, are cherry seeds lucky? Of course. Then he is replying, of course. Nothing is lucky if you put it away, and if you want luck, you must put it to some use. If you throw it, nothing is lucky. If you use that thing, it is going to be lucky. What can I do with the seed? Rakesh is asking. So grandfather is saying, plant it. So he can plant. So Rakesh found 3 small spades and began to dig up a flower bed. Then grandfather said, hey, not there, said grandfather, and I have sown already mustard seeds on that bed. So on that same floor, grandfather has already sown mustard seeds. Plant it in that shady corner where it won't be disturbed. And grandfather is giving advice to the child, Rakesh. You should plant a strawberry seed. You should plant a cherry seed where it will not be getting disturbed, where it won't be disturbed. So Rakesh went to a corner of the garden. There was a corner of the garden where the earth was soft and yielding. That means the soil was very soft and it can hold the seed. He did not have to dig. Nothing was required to dig. Just if he can press the seed, he can sow the plant. That's all. He pressed the seed into the soil with his thumb, and it went right in. He then had his lunch and ran off to play cricket. He forgot about that and he ran off to play cricket with his friends and forgot about the cherry seed. When it was a winter in hills, a cold wind blew down from the snows and went woo, woo, woo in the deodar trees. That means in winter season, the cold winds blow down from the forest. So how the deodar trees make the sound? Woo, 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 like that. And the garden was dry and bare because the winter cold winds were dry already. In the evening, grandfather and Rakesh sat over the charcoal fire. So what they did, they just fired something to get warm. And grandfather told Rakesh some stories. Stories about the people who turned into animals and ghosts who lived on the trees. Yes. So, and beings that jumped and stones that wept. In turn, Rakesh would read to him from the newspaper, and grandfather's eyesight being rather weak, because grandfather's eyesight, he has a specs and it is a weak eyesight. Therefore, he is asking Rakesh to read the newspaper. in the evening, grandfather and Rakesh, they sat over a charcoal fire because it was very cold. It was very cold weather. They wanted some warmth. And grandfather told Rakesh stories. Stories about people who turned into animals and ghosts who lived in the trees, and beans that jumped and stones that wept, and in turn Rakesh would read to him from the newspaper because grandfather's eyesight was very weak. That is the reason Rakesh has to read newspaper from grandfather, especially after the stories. Whenever the grandpa says the stories, after that Rakesh has to compulsory read the newspapers. But grandfather wanted all the news, complete news from the newspaper. They knew it. It was a spring when the wild duck flew north again. When it is a spring season, the wild ducks, they flew to north direction again, to Siberia. Early in the morning, when he got up to chop the wood and light a fire, Rakesh saw a V-shaped formation streaming northwards and heard the call of birds clearly throughout the thin mountain air. Now what happened, children, here? Rakesh saw early in the morning when he got up, he was chopping the wood and lighting the fire, and he saw one V-shaped formation streaming northwards, and he heard some birds clearly through the thin mountain air. And one morning in the garden, he bent to pick up what he thought was a small twig. And one morning what happened in the garden? In his garden, bending to pick up what he thought was a small twig, and found it to his surprise that was well rooted. So what he thought, he has to pick up something, but he saw a small twig, that is a small plant, V-shaped plant, and for surprise, what happened? It was well rooted in the soil. So he stared at it for a moment, like he's just watching like this to the tree for a moment, then ran to fetch grandfather. That means he went to take his grandfather, calling, Dada, Dada, come, look, the cherry tree has come up. The cherry tree has come up. What? Cherry tree? Grandfather is asking, what? Cherry tree? Asked grandfather, who had forgotten about it because grandfather already forgotten. Then he said, yes grandpa, we planted it last year. So look, it's come up. So Rakesh is telling to his grandpa. Then Rakesh went down on his hunches. Hunches is nothing but sitting on buttocks and thighs considered together. Like we sit together like this. So that is called as hunches. While grandfather bent almost double and peered down at the tiny tree. Grandfather has to bend, he cannot sit like this. So he is just staring at the tree like that. Then it was about 4 inches high. That time it was just only 4 inches high. Yes, it is a cherry tree, said grandfather. You should water it now and then. So he is advising Rakesh, yes, it is a cherry tree what we have sowed the seed, and now you should water that plant now and then. Rakesh ran indoors, so he went inside and came back with a bucket of water. And don't drown it, said grandfather. Like complete bucket, if you throw it on the small plant, the plant will definitely die. So that is the reason grandfather is saying, don't drown it. Okay, Rakesh gave it and a sprinkling and circled it with the pebbles. So Rakesh just sprinkled some water on the plant. Sprinkling is just like this. Okay, and circled the plants with pebbles. That means stones, circling the plant with stones. Then what are the pebbles for? Grandfather is asking. Then Rakesh is saying, for privacy purpose, grandpa, said Rakesh. Then grandpa understood, okay fine, this is for privacy purpose. Okay, then he looked at the tree every morning, but it did not seem to be growing very fast. Every morning if you see, will the tree grow? No, it will take some time. So he stopped looking at it and then except quickly out of the corner of his eyes, after a week or two, when he allowed himself to look at it properly, he found that it had grown at least 1 inch. So he thought, let's leave for a week. After a week, if I see the tree, what happens? Then after a week, when he comes down to the tree, when he comes down near the small plant, that plant has grown in 1 inch, a small inch. That year, the monsoon rains came early and Rakesh plodded to and from the school in the raincoat and the gum boots. That year, what happened? Monsoon rains started early. Okay, and Rakesh plodded. What is the meaning of plodded? That is walking very slowly with the heavy steps. That means one step, then the second step, like this. To walk from the school to house, he was taking so much of time to reach, and he used to wear raincoats and gum boots. Gum boots are the boots which we use in rainy season. Okay. Ferns sprang from the trunks of the tree. Strange looking lilies came up in the long grass, like just he was when he was moving towards the house, that they are describing what he was watching around him. So lilies came up in the long grass. The lilies were he can able to see in the long grass, and even when it wasn't raining, the trees dripped and mist came curling up the valley. Whenever it is not raining also, the trees dripped and mist, little bit moist and curling up the valley. The cherry tree grew quickly in this season. When the rain stopped, the cherry tree again started to grow quickly. It was about 2 feet high when a goat entered in the garden. When it became 2 feet high, that time one goat entered into the garden and it ate all the leaves of the small cherry tree. Then what happened? Towards the end of rainy season, new leaves appeared, and because the goat already eaten leaves, then Rakesh's grandfather said, never mind for this. The cherry tree can again grow, and you can again see the leaves. So Rakesh's grandfather is making him to understand, don't get upset because the goat ate leaves. It will grow again. Cherry trees are tough. Cherry trees are tough, so they can again produce the leaves. So never mind, he is telling. Towards the end of rainy season, new leaves appeared on the tree. So once again he saw the leaves. Then a woman cutting the grass cut the cherry tree in two. So woman was cutting the grass and she doesn't know it was planted a cherry tree, and she even cut that. When the grandfather saw what had happened, he went after the woman and scolded her. But the damage could not be repaired. What scolding? Like getting angry on the woman. Okay, he was angry on the woman because she cut the tree. But the damages could not be repaired at this time. Maybe it will die now. They thought that because she cut, it will die now, said Rakesh. Maybe grandfather also said. Then, but the cherry tree had no intention for dying because cherry trees are tough. It doesn't have the intention to die. By the time summer came round again, now it was the summer time, it had sent several new shoots with the tender green leaves. Rakesh had grown taller too. Summer season, then some time passed, then the tree even started growing, and Rakesh also grown taller now. He was 8 years now. Now he is 8 years and a sturdy boy with curly black hair and deep black eyes. How he was looking? He was having curly hair and then curly black hair, black deep eyes. So, and then grandfather blackberry. Grandfather called him. He used to call Rakesh a blackberry. That monsoon, Rakesh went home to his village to help his father and mother with the planting and plugging and sowing. Sowing in the sense putting the seed into the soil. That is a sowing. So Rakesh went to his mother's place to help his mother and father to sow the seeds, to plant the seeds like that. So he was thinner but stronger. Rakesh was looking thin but he was very strong. When he came back to his grandfather's house at the end of the rains to find that cherry tree had grown another feet, he again returns to his grandfather's house and he finds what? Cherry tree has again grown up another feet. It was now up to his chest, so it was now till here. Even when there was rain, Rakesh would sometimes water a tree. There was rain, if there is no rain also, Rakesh used to water the tree. He wanted it to know that he was there. He wanted it to know that he was there. He wanted to know the tree that Rakesh is there. One day he found a bright green praying mantis perched on the branch. Okay. Then peering at him with the blinking eyes, one day what he found? A bright green color prey. Okay, it's a mantis perched on the branch. It was sitting on the branch and peering at him, blinking eyes, like it is looking, staring to the strawberry tree. Rakesh let it remain there. Rakesh saw and he said, okay, let it remain there. It was a cherry tree first visitor. Okay, that prey was the first visitor of cherry tree. The next visitor was hairy caterpillar. The caterpillar came and started eating the leaves. Then Rakesh removed quickly and dropped it and said, you become butterfly and then come to my tree. Okay, winter came early. The cherry tree bent low with the weight of the snow. When winter started, it was snowing and the cherry tree, because of the heavy snow weight, it bent. Field mice sought the shelter in the roof of the cottage. Then the mice, what it did, it was not finding any shelter, so what it did, it just went into the cherry trees underground. He made one hole and he just started staying there. Okay, the road from the valley was blocked and for several days there was no newspaper. Because of the snow, every road was blocked. There was no newspaper also, and this made grandfather quite grumpy. His stories began to have unhappy endings. Now, in February, it was Rakesh's birthday. He was 9 years that time and the tree was 4, but almost as tall as Rakesh. One morning when the sun came out, grandfather came into the garden. Okay, let some warmth get into my bones, because the sun has come. It was a winter season. Everyone wants that the sun rays should be little bit. We want the sun rays should warm us our body. So that is the reason he also came out and sat. He stopped in front of the cherry tree. So grandfather, just while he was walking, he stopped in front of the cherry tree and stared at it for a few moments and then called out, Rakesh, Rakesh, come and look, come quickly before it falls. Rakesh and grandfather gazed at the tree. Then what happened? Rakesh and grandfather both are watching the tree like this. Then a tree asked the toe. It had performed a miracle. The tree performed a miracle. There was a pale pink colored blossom at the end of the branch. So every tree has branch. So end of the branch there was a pale pink colored blossom. That is a little bit of flower kind. So it was there. The following year there were more blossoms. So the cherry tree started producing more flowers on the branches. And suddenly the tree was taller than the Rakesh. Even though it was less than half of his age, that means Rakesh was big than him and tree was smaller. Even though it was half of age of Rakesh, then it was taller than grandfather, but it It was taller than even grandfather also, who was older than some of the oak trees. Grandfather was older than oak trees, but trees have very long height. Say they grow so taller. That is the reason we humans look very small in front of them. But Rakesh had grown too. Rakesh also started growing. He couldn't run and jump and climb the trees as well as most boys, and he read a lot of books, although he still liked listening grandfather's tales. So grandfather used to say the stories when he was small. So Rakesh still loves to listen some of the stories from his grandfather now also. If at all he is growing, he wants to listen to the stories. In the cherry tree, bees came to feed on the nectar in the blossoms. So the honeybees, they came to the cherry tree to take the nectar from the flower, and tiny birds pecked at the blossom and broke them off. The tiny birds, pecked in the sense they will break the flower from their beak. They break the flower from their beak. So pecked is for bird only, because birds have beak. That is the reason we use peck for birds. Strike something with its beak. Striking something with its beak. That means they were breaking blossom. They were breaking the blossom. Okay, but the tree kept blossoming right through the spring, and there were always more blossoms than the birds. So it started continuously giving blossoms. That summer there were small cherries on the tree. Now the tree even started producing cherries. Rakesh tested one and spat it out. It's too sour, he said. He tasted one cherry, but the cherry should ripe at least, right? But then he said, oh, it's too sour. That's all. They will be better next year, said grandfather, because it was the first fruit. Then grandfather said, next year if you taste the cherries, it will be more tasty. But the birds liked them, especially the bigger birds such as bulbul, scarlet, minivets. These are the names of the birds. They love cherries, and they fitted in and out of the foliage. What is foliage? They themselves fit on the leaves. Foliage are nothing but leaves, feasting on the cherries. So they will be just eating the cherries. They sit on the leaves and eat cherries. On a warm sunny afternoon, when even the bees looked sleepy, Rakesh was looking for the grandfather without finding him any of his favorite places around the house. On one sunny day afternoon, what happened? Even the bees looked sleepy. Even the honeybees and all, everyone looked sleepy. Rakesh was looking for his grandfather. Without finding him any of his favorite places around the house, he is just searching in and around the house, and then what happened? He couldn't find the grandpa. Then he looked out of the bedroom window and saw grandfather reclining on the cane chair under the cherry tree. So what happened? When he is completely searching in the house, he couldn't find the grandpa. But grandpa is sitting below the shade of the cherry tree, because cherry tree has grown and it was a big cane chair, and he is just reclining on the cane chair. There is just a right amount of shade there, little bit of shade, said grandfather, and I like looking at the leaves. Grandfather loves cherry leaves. They are very pretty leaves, said Rakesh. Okay, they are always ready to dance if there is a breeze. Breeze in the sense air. Whenever there is a air, the leaves start dancing. After the grandfather had come indoors, Rakesh went into the garden and lay down on the grass. So grandfather came indoor and Rakesh went out, and he is lying down under the tree on the grass, and he gazed up through the leaves at the great blue sky. He was just looking at the tree, and above there was a great blue sky, and turning on his side, he could see the mountain, and if he turns, he can even see the mountain. Then striding away into the clouds. What is striding? Walking with the long steps. He was thinking that the mountain is striding away into the clouds, and he was still lying beneath the tree when the evening shadows crept across the garden. Grandfather came back and sat down beside Rakesh because Rakesh was sleeping there. Again grandfather came and they waited in silence until it was dark. So they both were sitting there until it was the evening. There are so many trees in the forest, said Rakesh. What's so special about this tree? Why do we like it so much? We planted it ourselves, said grandfather. What grandfather said? We planted it ourselves. That's why it's a special tree. Just one small seed, said Rakesh. Just one small seed? And he touched the smooth bark of the tree that had grown. So what Rakesh is doing? He is just touching bark of the tree, what he is planted. And then he ran his hand along the trunk of the tree and put his fingers to the tip of the leaf. Even he started putting fingers on the leaf, and he was just moving his hand on the trunk of the tree. I wonder, he whispered. I wonder. So I surprised. He is whispering like this. Is this what it feels to be God? He is feeling like, is this what we feel to be God? Okay. So this was about the complete story of a cherry tree. So next part we will go ahead with grammatical structure, children. Okay. Done with that. Thank you so much.